it a little bit.
Yeah, we're on senses.
Okay. Senses. When we think about senses, things that go through the air, we're talking about voice. We're talking about, being able to hear things and, of course, smell things. Those are the airborne senses. So that's pretty obvious. Fire, sight, obviously because of correlation from fire to light, so you've got anything that you can see, that is the realm of fire. Water and taste, the obvious correlation to your mouth and, where you intake and things like that. And earth would be touch because you're touching the physical material and things like that. Anatomy, it's also, when we start getting through these, you start getting more and more correlations. Mm-hmm. But, breath, fire being, about energy, you're talking about that, action, that chi energy. Water, blood, obviously, because it's liquid. And earth is body because we're talking about the material world. So, this is your physical material shell.
Action.
Now, the elemental rulers is something that if you start studying things like mythological beasts and the magical bestiary and stuff like that, which there are some great books on.
And we're not talking about unicorns.
Damn.
We're talking about things that exist in not in the actual, but in the metaphor. Like the metaphorical or your upper plane and stuff like that. And so and some people say that they exist in the astral, and there's different beliefs and different trains of thought on that.
If we ever talk about the astral realm, that's a whole nother subject, but we can. So theoretically, you can see different things. Now, whether those things are spirits or whether they're perceptions of your mind or things you've externalized, we can debate that till day and night. So.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But regardless, whatever you think about the mythical beasts, there's plenty of literature on it, and I'm going to run down what these four creatures are and how they correlate to the elements. The first one is sylphs, and what a lot of people think of as sylphs are a lot like angels. They're communicators. They are winged creatures. Sometimes people see them covered in feathers and sometimes just having great wings. But they are communicators for divine energy. So it's going to sound a lot like angels for a lot of people who think of, if you're used to the Judeo-Christian idea of angels being a messenger for deity, it's pretty darn close to the same thing.
On a little slight tangent, some people have depicted Hermes, the Greek god of communication, as an angel. Yeah. Or one of his titles at one point was Angelus, which is, of course, the Latin term for angel, because he was a messenger, intermediary between the gods. That's kind of a little offshoot. Hermes is not typically depicted with wings.
On his feet, though.
There we go. 1 feet. There we go.
Salamanders, a little bit of behind this, because people, when they think of salamanders, they don't think of a mythical creature. Well, the ancients, one of the things about salamanders is that they didn't appear to have any, they appeared to be impermeable to fire. So in other words, they could walk through fire. They lived in usually very hot places, and at the same time weren't affected by it. So when the ancients thought of salamanders, they thought of a creature that was fire because of it. And when you think of lizards in general and some of their characteristics and how they relate to fire, a lot of them do live in very warm places. They've got and then if you look at things like chameleons and stuff like that, which are very close to salamanders, you've got the whole light spectrum changing of light and stuff like that. So, but the salamander, the mythical salamander, is basically the embodiment of a mythical creature of fire. Undines, they're not mermaids. They're instead of having like bottom fish, top human, they are somewhat of a hybrid between the two, from what I understand. They're probably the ones I know the least out of all of these. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and sometimes they're depicted as kind of the opposite of sylphs, and as opposed to communicators of information between the divine and below, shall we say? They're between thought and the real world. They could also be seen as intermediaries or communicators of the unconscious mind and the mundane world, bridging that gap instead. So, theoretically, I'm going to cut to a little shot in the dark here. If I'm having a dream, and I could say, oh, well, the undines brought me that dream. That's really kind of going for it. But that's kind of like one way to think about it. And remember, you can take all of this stuff with a grain of salt, and you can think of it, and you have to understand, in Wiccan belief, in metaphysical belief, there is a huge spectrum. People that are more atheistic who will just say, look, these are just archetypes. I'm talking about deities here. No, I'm not talking about deities. I'm saying, I'm talking about Apollo and Dionysus. I'm really talking about the capacity for humans to create music, or the capacity for humans to have enjoyment. On the other end of that, some people believe that we're actually talking about deities here. Is either way wrong? Is a mixture of the two wrong? No. But that's up to you. We're not going to preach either method.
There is, very much a spectrum of how people believe that deities exist, which we talked a little bit in the last class. We'll talk about even more in next class.
Yeah.
So to move it on. So if you're interested in talking about how people view deities, come to the next class, because that's going to be a big point of what we're going to talk about next class.
And that's a unicorns.
Oh, it's okay. I'll get over it.
Okay.
And unicorns, they do still have elements of correlations and stuff like that. In my early days as a Wiccan, was very fond of that, and there is some really great literature on it. If you're looking for a good book, I think Dane McCoy's got a good book on it, fairy folk and stuff like that. It's got some good correlations. But probably the most well-known of all these, when it comes to the mythical beasts, will be the gnome. And a lot of people still today carry that archetype of the gnome with them, regardless of their religion, because you see the gnome in the garden. They sell them at Walmart. They're this high and they've got the little red hat, and you put them in your garden because the gnome is the protector of Earth, and it is the protector of forests and gardens and things like that. And that's how the little gnome in the garden got started, is because that's your garden protector. And people still do it today, which I think is great.
There's also a cartoon in the 80s, David the Gnome, which is based upon, which is a great cartoon. You can actually find it on YouTube. But their lifestyle is very much almost like the Hobbits. Everyone's ever heard of a little thing called Lord of the Rings? I don't know if you have them. But, like the Hobbits are very earthy lifestyle. They're farmers. They're of the earth. They're drinking good ale.
They're barefoot.
You're very, you can't get more connected to the earth than that. Yeah. But I think Tolkien was very inspired by the gnomes when he was thinking of hobbits. Because, of course, all pagans have to know that word.
Yes.
And Harry Potter.
Exactly.
All that stuff, Well, there are a lot of fans of it. There are also pagans that absolutely despise that stuff. So, all right. Since we already talked about the witch's pyramid, the four virtues. This goes back to Greek philosophy and stuff like that. When we're talking about Socrates and Plato. The four virtues and the way that they correlate. When we're talking about error, you might not think of justice as a natural correlation until you think about error in society and social relation. So justice is the way that we relate to each other. If anybody's ever read Plato's Republic, when they talk about the just versus the unjust and things like that, and why it is that humans are just to each other and not unjust, then it'll help correlate that a lot better for you.